Halloween. Such a simple concept, yet something that has brought countless years of joy to me over the years. There is something about taking all of that society's standards and throwing them out the window for 24 hours that is just so absurdly fun. Children going to strangers' houses and taking candy from them. Something that would be barred any time of the year is suddenly standard. It is one of my only times where you can be in an elevator with Captain America, a sexy nurse, and a zombie, and nobody bats an eye. However, there is one Halloween tradition that is stuck with my old life. That is the annual Simpsons Treehouse of Horror specials. Nothing combines the fun and fear of Halloween quite like Homer recreating the Raven or Ned Flanders prancing around as the devil. They were a staple in my household growing up, and I still consumed them like candy each and every Halloween. That was why when I heard that in my local station, that was going to be running a Treehouse of Horror marathon Halloween night, I was pumped beyond belief. However, looking back, I wish I had done something else, anything other than witnessing what I did. Halloween night passed, as always did. Spent the night watching classic horror movies and handing out candy to occasional trick-or-treaters. As the marathon neared its start, I found myself feeling like an 8-year-old boy all over again. I set up my snacks, including the leftover Halloween candy that I overstocked on for exactly this purpose, and got ready for the night of fun. For the first few hours, it was nothing but spooky nostalgic magic. However, I did not fully comprehend the full magnitude of what I was entering. With 50 specials, I was in for about 15 hours of television, and I have to admit that this is a bit of an undertaking even for me. Eventually, I succumbed to boredom and sugar crash and fell asleep. When I was woken a while later by a commercial that was louder than it had any right to be. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and one of the specials was just ending. I was about to throw in the towel because they were getting into the later specials that I'm sorry that I just don't have the same level of horror humor as the older specials. But something caught my eye. The special had an opening that I had never seen before, and I was intrigued as which one it could be. The special opened with the family watching TV. Kent Brockman was just finishing up the nightly news when suddenly a loud grandfather clock in the living room began to chime. The Simpsons all at once went into this strange trance, and a Nucion said, "It's time." All of a sudden, the animation became much sharper and more fluid. They clearly had hired an outside professional to do the scene. One by one, the family members started to convulse and transform into horrifying creatures. Marge's body started to strengthen, and its twist became serpent-like. Her eyes became red with a yellow lining, and she became a snake monster. Bart was next, with his back popping out and developing a hunch. His skin turned green, and he grew gills and flippers, becoming some sort of creature in the Black Lagoon type monster. He feels his crook back and makes a joke about this chiropractor and is not going to be happy about this. Homer begins growling, and claws erupt from his fingers. His mouth became a snout, and brown hair erupts from all over his body, covering him everywhere except the top of his head, leaving him still effectively bald. This caused him to issue his trademark, "Doh!" Lisa stood awaiting her transformation only for a simple witch's hat to appear on her head. I will admit this has got a good laugh for me. Finally, Maggie floated into air and started turning into a bat while performing a deep demonic laugh that sent a very real chill through my blood. Suddenly, all their eyes snapped wide open, and they simply stared at the screen. It disturbed me of how intense and creepy their stares were, because it truly gave me the feeling that they were staring at me, and not just the screen. One by one, they started to speak, with each character delivering a single sentence. Won't you join us? For terror of the likes of which that you've never felt, these terrors are not for the faint of heart. We have delved deep into your mind and pulled you out of your darkest fears. If you don't wish to subject yourself to this, then we would humbly advise you to stop now. You have been warned. All at once, they leapt at the screen, and the blood tinkled down, spelling Treehouse of Terror. As it went to commercial, I found myself needing a minute to catch my breath slightly. I have seen all the specials, including the new one that aired a few days prior, and there's not one of them I had never even heard of Treehouse of Terror before. Under different circumstances, I would have thought it was just a cheap knockoff, but the voice actors and the animation budget were there. All my thoughts of calling it a night, I went out the window, and I knew I had to keep watching. That may have been the best opening out to one of these I had ever seen. It was genuinely funny and had creepy quality that many of the later specials were missing. I sat back down and waited for the renewed vigor to the special to resume. The first segment was simply titled We Be Bored, a mediocre pun that was par from the course for these sketches. It opened in the elementary school auditorium where Principal Skinner was holding an assembly. He was going over the new terms and conditions for the school's computer operating system in the extensive and cruciating detail. Most of the students were either asleep or close to it. At the top of the auditorium were a group of students including Bart, Lisa, Milhouse, Nelson, and Martin sat. Everyone with the exception of Martin were holding onto consciences by a thread. Bart looked to his right and saw a small crawl space with an ominous red light shining. Bart convinces the other students to join him in escaping through the crawl space. Nelson drags Martin along with so he couldn't rat them out to the Skinner. They made their way to the crawl space and find themselves in Skinner's office. They ransack his desk until they discovered their permanent records. Bart asks what he says, and Lisa says that it looks like Skinner just slammed his head onto a book and held it up, revealing a perfect imprint of his angry face. Upon further investigation, they discover a confiscated Ouija board. The group gets excited and decides to play the forcing the recludent Martin to join in. The scene plays out with them asking the board different questions. Milhouse asks if he will ever have a girlfriend, and the cursor continually slams into the word no. They ask when Martin will die, and the cursor spells out the word soon. Martin begins to panic and takes his hand off the cursor. An ominous wind begins blowing in the room, and the board starts flowing in the air. The cursor moves on its own, spelling out, "You didn't say goodbye." Shadowy arms and legs push out of the board and it rushes at Martin, throwing him onto a coat rack, impaling him. Nelson tries to fight the board, but its shadows wrap around Nelson's arm and forces him to punch himself in the face while chanting, "Stop tormenting yourself." Nelson's bloody body falls to the floor, and Milhouse turns to Bart and Lisa. "There is no chance of me surviving this one, is there?" he asks them. The Ouija board appears behind him and says, "No." He then grabs Milhouse's neck and snaps it. The board slowly advances on the trembling Bart and Lisa. The two hold on each other and say goodbye to one another. The board suddenly stops and says, "Oh, goodbye then." The shadows disappears and the board lies harmlessly on the floor. Bart and Lisa shrug and leave. The two are about to walk back through the auditorium doors when Skinner walks through the doors and scalds them by saying he is now going to have to start over for them. Bart asks if they can just say that they accept and be done with it. Skinner reluctantly agrees and escorts them back to class. He takes them into a dark classroom and shuts the door with a sinister smile on his face. This is where things take an extremely uncomfortable turn. All music and sound stops and the camera begins moving back down the hall towards the auditorium. It pushes the doors and reveals all the other students still in the room. However, they are no longer sleeping. All the students are extremely pale with their eyes wide in terror. They are completely motionless, and it is clear that they are in fact dead. The camera slowly pans, revealing all their dead faces, frozen with the last look of utter terror they will ever experience. As the commercial break started, I sat there stunned. The Simpsons had explored dark territory before that, but that final scene was downright disturbing. I was shocked, but becoming more interested because I was hoping for this for years. A truly frightening Halloween special. I was invested in now, and I couldn't wait for more. When the commercials ended and the second segment started, the title was Dawn of the Unfed. Wow, they were really starting to stretch for these puns now. It opened on the nuclear power plant where Lenny, Carl, and Charlie are staring at the clock that is about to strike noon. They grow more desperate and as the seconds click by, and they complain about being extremely hungry. The clock strikes noon, sounding the lunch bell, and the group rush toward the lunchroom. Their path becomes blocked by Mr. Burns, who informs them that there's a problem with the reactor, and that they need to fix it before they can eat. Charlie points out by law that they have a right to refuse unsafe work. Mr. Burns smiles and explains that they never read the terms and conditions of their contracts, and that they had waived that right. The group let out a sigh into biohazard suits. They tried to fix the core, but it springs a strong leak, sending a noxious green gas in the chamber. They begin to panic, but Carl does a reading and discovers that the radiation levels are leveling out to the exact same amount that the suits can take. As long as the radiation in this area stays exactly the same, they would be alright. A sudden beep gets their attention, and they slowly look over to see a lunchroom on the other side of the glass, where Homer just puts his lunch in the microwave. "Why is the reactor next to the lunchroom?" Lenny asks. "Budget cuts," Carl responds. The trio suits start to burst open, exposing them to toxic gas. The gas melts their skin, turns them into zombie-like mutant. They break through the glass into the lunchroom, and they begin hissing at the word "hungry" at Homer. "Hey, no way I brought this TV dinner, and I'm not sharing it." "Okay, oh no, oh don't worry, we plan to eat you." Charlie rasps. "Okay, we can split the green beans," Homer replies fearfully. The three rush at Homer and flees down the hall. Homer can't run anymore, and he attempts to hide in some pipes behind him. However, no matter how hard he squeezes, he is too fat to fit in between them. Giving up, he runs to the suggestion box down the hall and writes down, Please make hiding places large enough for the average American citizen." He puts the message in the box and down to his office and barricades the door. The three zombies begin to scratching at the door and try to coax Homer out. "Let us in, Homer. We are so hungry. We will make it quick. We promise just to open the door." Once again, the music cuts out, and the scene cuts to different parts of the plant where several bodies lay on, and the only sound are drops of blood hitting the floor. The scene cuts back to Homer's office, where the zombies are still whispering for Homer to open the door. The camera slowly pans to Homer, who is dead. His eyes were lifeless and his face is extremely shrunken and showing that he had starved to death over time. The scene cuts out on that disturbing image. I rushed to the washroom as the commercials began and started breathing heavily, debating if I was going to spill back out of all the Halloween candy. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Homer's shrunken face, which looked just like the real ones I had seen in history textbooks. I found myself shaking and I didn't know how to stop. I had been watching the gruesome horror movies since when I was 5 years old, and I had never had anything affect me like that, especially not in a cartoon. There was just something about the images of those dead children, of Homer's emaciated body that just felt too wrong, too real. I debated on turning off the TV, but no. I had come this far and I couldn't turn back now. I had to see through that to the end. This was after all just a simple cartoon. The final sketch was a complete departure from the first two, from anything Simpsons in fact. While the first two sketches had disturbing moments, they still carried the traditional references and humor expected from the series. The sketch contained no humor and no genuine story. The entire sketch was in point-of-view format, taking the perspective of an unseen character. They are sleeping in a tent when Bart and Lisa come in and tell them it's time. They get up and begin following through the woods. This goes on for several minutes, and during this time there is no dialogue and no jokes of any kind. Occasionally, Bart or Lisa will turn back and stare at you again. Again, I get that strange feeling that in the opening where they are not just looking at the screen but right at me. However, it is not simply the staring that was unsettling, but this time their expression. Their faces were filled with sorrow and empathy. It was the kind of a look a child might give a beloved pet being taken to the vet to be put down. It filled me with both fear and sadness, the likes of which I had never felt before. After nearly 10 minutes, they finally arrived at the mysterious dark cave. The two turned around but refused to look at me in the eyes, staring mournfully at the ground instead. "You need to go in alone," Bart said melancholically. "We can't go in. It's not yet anyway," Lisa said with an equal sadness that was tinged with fear. The unseen protagonist walked into the cave, and with the increased weariness, transfers the darkness. Each step away from the entrance brought more and more darkness before they stand on the precipice of the utter blackness. It is there that the walking stopped and they simply wait. Then, emanating from the darkness, came the sounds of heavy footsteps, growing closer and closer. They moved at a slow and steady pace, growing louder, each step echoing through the cavity of my real chest. Though the dim light of the sun setting behind the point of view I began to notice a shadow in the blackness, a phenomenon that I know is impossible, yet there was that was that shadow forming before my eyes. The shadow was the type that seemed to look like both nothing and yet everything at the same time. The formless mass that embodies your worst fears as if it was made out of it. It was a shadow of pure terror. It moved towards me and I suddenly seemed out of control of my own body, and it felt convulsing. A slimy stream of drool and foam came from my mouth, and my body began to shaking. I hit the floor, and everything went black. I awoke to a few hours later to the light of dawn. The TV was still playing the marathon from the night before. However, I had no desire to watch it, not after what I saw. I pulled myself off to the floor and found my shirt soaked with a combination of sweat and saliva. I had never had a history of epilepsy before, and I could not think of what I saw that might cause it. I picked up my phone and jumped online to see if anyone else witnessed this strange episode, but my searches came up blank. Could I have dreamt about the whole thing? But if that was the case, why was I on the floor covered in my own drool? I don't know what I saw that night, but there are moments where I see random things that trigger my memory. Every time this happens, I suffer a massive panic attack and nearly seize again before I could get a good picture of it. Whatever it was, it will haunt me for the rest of my days. I send this story to you for all seeking answers. Did any of you see this episode? Did anyone else experience the same terror as I felt? And above all, if I'm not alone on this, what did you see in that darkness? Well, my fellow Chicagoans, that was Treehouse of Terror, a Simpsons lost episode creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? It was actually pretty decent, and if it would be a normal Treehouse of Horror episode, if you ask me. In fact, I can see this being on television if it even existed. The story was interesting, and it actually does have something in the end that did make me wonder. And that would be if the episode was just a hallucination, or that our protagonist took drugs or something, to the point he watched a Simpsons episode that never even existed. That's a neat concept, I will admit there. Well, one other thing I liked is that there's a little bit of mystery on who the shadow figure is. Like, we don't even freaking know who this mysterious character was in the third part of the episode. Like, who knows who it is? Now, do I have problems with this story? 1. The character staring is pretty much a cliche and doesn't make any sense. Author, why do you have to put that in? Because that doesn't add up into the story. 2. Why did Skinner even become evil and randomly murder the children all of a sudden? Like, was he possessed by the demon or something? Or what? Because apparently, there is no explanation onto why Skinner even killed the fucking children from the classroom. Please explain next time. 3. I have seen some grammar errors in the story. Not like the whole story, but a few grammar errors that need some fixing. Perhaps it could have been the fact that Google Docs doesn't correct all your errors, apparently. That's whatever I heard of, apparently. 4. The fucking protagonist of the story going to the bathroom to fucking throw up. How many times have I ever seen this in a lost episode creepypasta? Because there have been a ton of stories, including shitty creepypastas that have our character either vomiting, pissing, shitting, or even having an orgasm due to how disturbing the show, movie, game is. No, an actual human throwing up or something like that due to the episode being scary does not make any sense. Lost episodes are nothing like shock videos whatsoever. Unless if there's any shock images in the episodes itself, in which Squidward's suicide has the trope in it with murdered children. And yes, that is a cliche by itself. Anyway, that is all to the story. I thought it was pretty decent, but it had flaws, and yeah. Anyway, on my final rating, the story is either a 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. It would be a normal Treehouse of Horror episode, and I do think the concept of the episode being real is neat. But there have been a few flaws into the story that would have worked better. Anyway, if you agree or disagree with my opinion, that is fine. We are all entitled to our own opinions. Anyway, I'm out.